I'm Gina, and Greg and I have been married for almost 31 years now, and we have 3 boys. We have Zachary, Tyler, and Tate. Zach just turned 27, and I know, and Tyler's 25, and Tate's 21. I'm a stay-at-home mom. I part-time am a personal trainer, but most of the time I'm just hanging out with the family and doing ministry with our special needs ministry.
And I'm Greg, and this is my high school sweetheart that came after me. So it's been 31 wonderful years. And I am involved with, I'm a sales director for the Western United States for a heart valve company. Born and raised in Torrance. That as we've got to know each other, we've moved all over the country. We lived in Hawaii, Las Vegas, North Carolina, back to Torrance, out, back to Torrance. So yeah, that's us.
I was 14 and Greg was 13, and he doesn't even remember meeting me. I saw him. I'd been eyeing him for a long time, but there we were at church one Sunday night, and I saw him sitting all by himself. I'm like, I'm gonna go sit right next to him. So I think I sat like there were 2 seats in between us, but I slowly started scooching, and I'd hold up my hymnal kind of this way, and eventually when it was time to say hi and greet people, I said hi to him, but he doesn't remember.
I don't remember her trying to scooch up and be near me. I completely forget that. I do remember her brother asking me for a favor to take her out to a dance in high school. And I knew she was around. I'd always see her hanging out in front of her brother's house. She was hanging out with all these other guys on the street, but they were like these cool guys, and she would wear bandana in her hair. She seemed kind of tough. So I was kind of scared of her actually when I first met her, because she was older by a year. And back then, being a year older is a lot older, right? So, but I said, yeah, I'll go out with her. And from then we went on a date, and then went on a couple more dates. And then she went on a missions trip to Mexicali, right? And then when she came back, I asked her to go steady with me, right? Mm-hmm. And from there, then
But when I came back from Mexicali, I was done with him. I thought, I just want to serve the Lord. I'm not all about boys anymore. And I was done with Greg Hubert. And I think that's why.
I couldn't have you, and I wanted you.
There's something about that.
Yeah.
But yeah.
So yeah, that's kind of how we met. So our first experience with disabilities was when we were at our church serving. We had a family who they were foster parents, and they only would foster parent kids with disabilities. So they had older kids, and some had Down syndrome, right, and varying degrees of disabilities. And I remember, and maybe you have a different version, but I remember them saying, "Can you watch our kids while we go to church?" This family, because they couldn't go to church. And so we weren't dating were we dating at the time? Okay, so I said, "Hey, would you want to come help with me?" And at the time, Gina had a real fear. She was really scared around kids with disabilities,
adults with disabilities.
Yeah, they kind of scared you. And I don't know, for whatever reason, I just felt I had more of a real tender heart. And I remember we worked with them that day, and I remember saying to Gina, I said, wouldn't it be funny if we got married and God gave us kids with disabilities, right? Isn't that what I said?
Yes. Well, that'll never happen. Well, I think when we first got married, I think we really just wanted a home that honored the Lord, in everything that we did, and in our relationship, in our friends' relationships. And then when we decided to have kids, we kind of really hoped to have this heritage of faith with our children, and then someday grandkids, but the whole experience, the traditions of holidays, growing up as the kids grew up, all their graduations and weddings, sporting events. You were an athlete and I was a cheerleader, so having boys and girls that did all these different things was a lot of fun, and we were looking forward to that.
And we wanted a large family. I think we both came from families with four children. So I think we just had in our head we wanted to have 4 kids, right? That just was like the number in our head. And when I proposed, I was going to be a pastor. So she's going to be the pastor's wife, and I was going to be the pastor. And we had people that were really influential in our lives were were pastors that we really looked up to and were mentors to us, and they discipled us, and so we kind of had an idea of what that would be like. And so, yeah, so I think we just wanted to have a home that was real honoring to the Lord. We didn't know what God was going to do in our lives, right? But we wanted to make sure whatever that was, we'd have a real impact for Him. So.
He wasn't talking when my best friend's kids were talking. He was playing by himself. Everyone else is making friends, and he was getting lost, you know. Our pediatrician was saying there's nothing wrong with him. He's just a boy and he's slow. And I thought, well, that's great, but I think something else is. But we were in Hawaii at the time and couldn't find anyone to help me figure out what was going on. In fact, I actually thought he might have autism, and doctors and therapists told me, no, this is not what he has. And I thought, okay, well then, what is it? So I finally find this psychologist that I take him to, and Greg's working. Zach is like 2.5, and Tyler's not even 6 months yet, or maybe just about 6 months. So I'm holding Zach's hand. I have Tyler in one of those backpacks on my back, and we go to the psychologist's office, and we have this meeting with her. She does her assessment, and it takes a long time. She's playing these games with him on the floor, and I'm babysitting my other one. And finally, when it's all said and done, she says, "Okay, I'm finished. Would you like the results?" And I'm like, okay, sure. And I'm like packing up the diaper bag, getting ready to walk out the door. And she's, well, I think you need to sit down. And I thought, what's this lady going to tell me that no one else has been able to tell me? Well, she sits down and goes through her analysis and says, well, he has a minimum of 18 characteristics that fall on the autism spectrum. You know, I'm packing my bag and I'm like slowing down, and I'm like, and so she keeps talking, and it's almost like, you know, the teacher on Charlie Brown, where her voice is going wah, 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 and I'm like, what's going on? And I hear nothing at that point. But I pack up my stuff, and I said thank you, and then I grab everything and grab the boys, to put Tyler on my back, and she wants to know if I want a follow-up appointment, and I'm like, I'll give you a call. I got to go talk to my husband, and we didn't have cell phones then, or I didn't have a cell phone yet, so I had to wait till Greg came home from work to tell him. So I remember getting in the elevator, because it was probably on the 4th or 5th floor, and as the elevator door shut, I'll never forget this picture, because the doors were mirrors. And I look back, and there's this, you know, 29-year-old girl with a 2-year-old and not even a 1-year-old, and I just started to cry. I thought, I'm in Hawaii, I'm on an island, no friends yet, no family, no church, and my husband's at work, and I don't know how to get a hold of him. And my son's just been diagnosed with autism. I didn't know what to do. So I just cried and prayed the whole way home and waited till Greg got home. So that was like when I first found out. So.
Yeah, so I was the one that was always, I didn't think it was happening, you know. I was like, no, he's just slow. I was more like in agreement with what the doctors were saying. And so when we were in Hawaii, you know, we kind of knew something was up, but I always remember when the doctor came out, and not very compassionate, but I remember him saying, oh, your son's, he's mentally retarded, you know, and what?
Yeah, you know? That was a pediatric neurologist too, and he had said, you know, okay, prepare yourself, your son's mentally retarded, start looking at institutions because there is no hope. There is no hope. That was when you and Greg's mom was there with us that time too.
We were just crying in the hallway. We just grabbed each other. We all started crying. So when we first kind of just had this sense, or Gina had this sense in Hawaii that maybe Tyler was, the progression at each time, it was like when they got to be about 3, we could kind of see it happening. They'd have normal development of language. We could see them around other kids their age, and then it would just go off the map about 18 months. They'd kind of lose their language. So that was kind of the cycle. We'd see it with Zach, and then Gina noticed with Tyler. And then we'd get the formal diagnosis with Zachary, and then we would like break down and cry together. And then we'd go, well, maybe Tyler's not, kind of work with Tyler. And then I thought it would be a little different with Tyler, but I remember same thing. We'd go to UCLA, BJ Freeman, then we get the formal diagnosis in the mail, like we already kind of knew in our hearts. And we'd get the letter, we cry. we sat down at dinner one night, I remember, because we wanted this family with 4 kids, you know. And we said, okay, we're 2 for 2 now, all right? We got 2 kids with autism. And we thought we wanted to have 4 kids. And we said, you know, God, would he really give us a 3rd child with autism? And I remember sitting at dinner and said, we should probably wait and pray about this because we weren't really sure. And so we waited a little longer with Tate, and then I think we both prayed about it and decided, okay, if God wants us to have a 3rd child with autism, then when we had Tate, one of the prevailing theories was that autism was caused by vaccinations. And so we thought we were going to choose not to, we're going to try that. We thought, well, maybe that's what will work. So we did. We decided not to vaccinate Tate, and sure enough, when we got to the kind of 18-month mark, he was developing language, and then I remember vividly, it just went away. Both of us realized, you know, Zach, Tyler, and Tate, the kids that God gave us were exactly the way God wanted them to be. And I think as we struggled through some of the emotions of the diagnosis and the emotion of it, we realized, okay, God, these are the kids you want. And after that, we're like, 3's enough. We got our hands full. And so I think that's when it really started to hit us that life would be different, you know, that from when I looked at the boys, I thought, are they going to ever be able to play sports and enjoy it? Because that was kind of what I loved growing up, doing things that were social. What are their friendships going to be like? How are they going to do in school? Are they going to go to college? I thought maybe we were going to see our kids get married and we'd have grandkids. And from that point, when Tate was diagnosed, 90, it would have been almost 2000, right? 97, he was born, 2000.
So 99.
99. It was like, I think that's what really hit us, that life, our world as a family was going to be unlike most families, because most people didn't have all autistic kids. And I think that shook us quite a bit. I mean, really made us go, our fears were what's life going to be like down the road.
But I think what was different for me is knowing that all of them were on the spectrum, that God had something different for me. And I was actually really okay with it. I just wanted to know what it was now, you know, and God wasn't going to let me know right away. So I had to live in community with all my friends and be subject to the judgment that everyone else was going to give me, that didn't know whether or not my kids were unruly or did they have something else going on, when most of the time they thought, you know, I had unruly children. And I remember one time standing at Zach's kindergarten class, and these moms were telling their kids to not play with Zach, stay away from that boy because he's bad, you know. And I'm right here. And I thought, this is what my life's going to be like? This is going to be really weird. So it really changed a lot in having to constantly explain to my friends, even my friends and family, this is my new plate that God's given me. These are the cards. I have different children. I can't go to the playground because I've got 3 people in diapers. I'll be in the bathroom changing all the time, or one's kicking and screaming, and just the sounds. I can't tolerate the normal sounds other kids can do, or it was just really isolating. I think that was probably the hardest thing.
So the challenges that we faced in church, because we met in church, right? It was a big part of our lives, and we were youth leaders growing up, and we always wanted to continue to serve in ministry. And I was a pastor, and we were leaders in all the things that we did. But I remember when the church I was on staff at, so it's just the most vivid memory. I was on staff at a church, and then I left vocational ministry, and we still served. I was like one of the college leaders at the church at the time. I remember 2 of my best friends were staff guys. One had just left as college pastor, and one became the senior pastor that I started there with. And I remember we took Zach, I remember, to Sunday school. And I remember we came back. I don't know if we were both picking him up. I don't know if it was you who picked him up and told me the story. I just remember the feeling. But we came back and we were greeted, and they said, you know, if you're going to bring Zach to church any longer, one of you are going to have to stay in here with him, because he got out. He got out unbeknownst to us, and we kind of lost him for a little bit. But if you can't come with him and stay with him in Sunday school, then we can't have him anymore. And I mean, was hurt. I was angry. I mean, this was really, really hard. And so the person who told me, of course, me being the protective father I went and talked to my buddy, the senior pastor, and said, you know, I can't believe this is happening. And what he did is he backed his children's director and said, well, I'm going to support her decision. And I said, well, can we work this? He goes, no, I mean, if you're going to bring him to Sunday school, then one of you are going to have to stay with him. And I think that was pretty hard, that we couldn't even bring our son to church without going to Sunday school with him. It was just hard to fathom that would be the case, where the one place you think your kids would be accepted and loved and people would reach out to them, that was the one experience that let us know, where do we go now?
Yeah.
Where do we go? Because
if our own church family who knows us and we thought loved us doesn't want us there, is there going to be a bunch of strangers that are going to take us in? And yeah, it was kind of scary.
Yeah, it was hard. I don't think we were ever like, I don't want anything to do with the Lord anymore. It wasn't like an abandonment, like run from him. But I can sure tell you the way I felt was, I think some of the initial emotions are, did I do something wrong? Am I being punished for something I did in my past? Is this some kind of a curse? Are you disciplining me, Lord, because you know you're trying to refine me?
I think I felt similar in terms of that process. The first thing I asked was, what did I do wrong? Because clearly my theology is messed up, because at the time I was thinking, if I do all these things and love you first, Lord, and obey you, you know, good things are going to happen. I mean, not horrible things. I'm like, and so that's where I went first, was that, what did I do wrong? And what am I continuing to do wrong that this is happening again and again?
So there would be times that I just, and not angry because my dreams were dashed. I was angry because when I looked at my kids, the struggles they went through. I hurt for them. And so I was like, why? I asked the why question, so I'd get angry at God, but I would wrestle with God. I didn't run away. And I would just tell him right to his face how upset I'd be. But I knew it was from him. I knew these were blessings from the Lord, but it didn't make it the theological facts of what he did in our lives didn't change the emotions I had towards him. But I think like any good relationship, because I was able to share it, and when I'd read the Psalms, he's big enough to take it. I never like cursed him or anything like that. It was just, I was so mad at him that he made my kids' lives so tough, because I didn't know what my kids really knew. I would really get frustrated with him, but I think that's what, to answer your question, where we're at spiritually, I think we'd go through seasons of grief, and we still do. We'd go through, we know why God does this, we know he's taking care of our kids, he knows he's created them this way, but we still go through cycles of grief. As our kids they're getting older, and you look at when some of our friends' kids are getting married and they're having grandkids now, we still go through that. Those still go through. We're not going to experience that, But we have to remind ourselves that, this is what God has given to us, and this is the joy we have in our kids. And He's got a different path for us. But I think it's drawn us closer to have a deeper relationship with the Lord and with each other because of how the depth of the grief and the height of the joy. They're the greatest teachers to us that God's given us because they help us see what's really important in life. It helps us to see our family purpose it's to love God and to love people and to make sure that we, with the resources God has given us as a family, that we can reach other families created with what we've always called God-designed abilities. And that's the only thing we're here for, I think, to see Christ exalted to those families. Not that other families don't care, we don't care about. It's about, we feel like we have a special voice to be able to reach those families in a unique way because of what God's given us. And so it's a grace. There's a real peace about when we look at our kids, even though I still get really emotional every time I retell our story. It's just a peace in knowing that we're exactly where God wants us to be for however many days He has us left on this earth. That we just want to be present and impact as many lives as we can wherever He puts us.
I think His grace has been transforming emotionally, mentally, in every way to understand it and embrace it better by having our children, loving them where they're at, and not getting, even in parenting and training and raising them up, we don't get bent out of shape when they don't understand that they have to do this or whatever. Just the practical things of life and being kinder and more patient and gracious with them. God's taught that same grace for me to give to others, especially for those people who don't understand what we're going through. When they are ignorant and they're being mean, when I can immediately have the right to be angry at them, God's just transformed my mind and allowed me to have grace towards them and patience with them because I'm seeing life through my children, that I can demonstrate that to others, which we used to not be able to, And when we were hurt for our kids because we thought they were suffering and they were hurting in this crazy world, they're actually being protected by so much of the stuff that we're worried about. There's a grace in that. Their salvation is the greatest grace that I think we get to experience.
What God's done, I think we're at kind of the latter season of our lives, and we're trying to make sure that we can be used by God to give other families hope in Christ. That the very things we were worried about are the things about our kids' future. Now, the families we didn't have to look to, we want to be that family, right? We want to point them to the cross so that when someone gets a diagnosis of autism and they're scared to death, what do we do? What do we do? That we can say, it'll be okay. We've been there, right? And it's not that's going to be easy. It's going to suck in a lot of ways. But we know who's given that blessing, that your child hasn't been cursed. God doesn't hate you. He's not trying to push you into the ground and bury you. You're going to have the best life ever in Christ with these kids. And you're going to get there. Don't give up. Don't leave your husband or your wife because you have kids you didn't think you're going to have. It's going to be a deeper sorrow and a greater joy. And you're going to have a better marriage, and you're going to have a deeper walk with Christ because of it. It's a blessing. And I think our family too, the other thing I'm finding is that our kids give us a voice to people who would never listen to the gospel. It's a big deal. People who will say, when they have kids like ours, and someone says, I want to help you, say, oh, you can't relate. People can't cop out on that one with us. We can say, no, we've been through it. And we can say, this is why we made it. This is how we live each day with hope. And we can share that's because of Christ. And people, we've seen it even at our church. We've seen people that have told us, no, we're not coming, you don't understand. And I can push back with God's strength and say, no, we do understand. You need to come. You need to come and meet these people. They're different. This church cares. They will accept your children. They'll love them with dignity and respect. And we've seen so many families come and they stick. They stay, right? And we hear some of those kids sing in church and bless people across the church. People get to serve those kids. They want to serve them, and they're seeing Jesus because of those kids with disabilities. So I think specifically Lighthouse has been a real grace to our family, because I think the one story we tell is it had been years since we had been invited over to someone's house just to hang out. And when we came to Lighthouse, and I think we told that to Kim, right, and Jen, and they invited us over to their house, you know, and our kids rummaged through all their food and through their refrigerator, and
They crawl in their beds.
they plugged their toilet to a tune of $3,000 later to clean it out. But they invited us over again, and your family's invited us to your house, and we've had people do that.
Multiple families out there.
And that's pretty unique. As simple as that may sound, that people actually want us to come over, and when something gets broken or a car gets scratched or family heirloom falls on the ground, you know, we used to never hear from that family again. So it's been a true practical demonstration of God's love to our family by our church family. And we've seen that with other families now have come in to our church with disabilities. They keep coming back, and we always say we're the perfectly imperfect family, right, created by the Lord. So we definitely don't fit the mold of a traditional family. We're pretty flawed, but we know God's created us exactly that way. And the church has been great to love us and helps us. All we've ever wanted is just not for the church to do everything for us, but to let us have our place in the body.
And they don't come in and ask us exactly what they're supposed to do, because we don't really know either. It's like, I'm not really sure, but can you come over and we'll figure it out together? And that's sweet. They're afraid and we're afraid, but we all get to come in together and figure it out, and knowing that that's okay. That's really okay. Because every family's different, and we don't know what's going to work. For one family that works for ours, works for them, maybe not for us. So you can't really say this is what works for families like ours. It's like, you know, they're a family totally different than us. So that's what's neat, is everyone's willing to come alongside each other.
Just come in and love them like they would any other family. I think the challenge is families like ours are going to have unique needs that you just can't put them in a third grade class and expect them to cooperate like a lot of third graders in the class. It's going to be a little different. But I think if a church would say, have a commitment, in my experience, it's been that the leadership of that church really needs to be on board and embraced, because if they're not, it kind of just falls apart. But I think if either a pastor or a key leader at that church has been affected by disabilities profoundly, and they're open to that, it happens just one family at a time. I think disabilities ministry is an overwhelming prospect because of the resources that are perceived resources to support them. What do we do? Where do we put them physically? Do they go into a regular classroom? Do they have a separate classroom? It's overwhelming to the extent that it would just be easier to not have them there. So I think if you just start with the need that God brings to you, if that's one family, just love that family well. That's all you need to do. and that'll have its own set of unique challenges.
One family at a time. Just love them well.